arts-based research is. Now, we all know what research is, right? Research is, and here's a good definition of it. How does this go now? There you go. This is the UN definition of research, and I'll explain it in English. So don't worry if you don't understand it all, right? And please forgive me if you think I'm being too condescending. Any creative activity, systematic just means planned activity, right? It's not random, it's planned. Undertaking in order to increase the stock of knowledge, including knowledge of man, culture, and society, and the use of that knowledge to make new applications. That's really what research is. Now, the word itself, now I can't go back to this thing anymore, right? Okay, this one I wanted you to see, because the word itself is quite strange. Research. In other words, you're searching for it again. That is, of coming back again and again to what we believe. We scrutinize the world, and thereby we re-examine it. In other words, as academics, we are not satisfied with the way things are. We come back every now and then, and we ask questions about it. Because if we are satisfied with the way things are, then there will be no advancement whatsoever. We will just go sit in our easy chair and watch terrible TV shows or whatever it might be, but there will be no advancement.
Finish everything.
Yeah, just all finished, right? If you ever come thinking that everything has been found, then you're in trouble. In fact, back in the 19th century in the United States, government was going to close down the patent office. You know what a patent is? P-A-T-E-N-T? You know what a patent is?
Registered?
Something similar, copyright, right?
Yeah, but it's like an invention, right? It's an invention.
Yeah.
And once you invent something, you patent it.
Yeah.
And
So
then it belongs to you, right?
Intellectual property.
Yeah. In 19th century, they were going to shut down the American Patent Office because they believed that everything that could be invented had already been invented. How wrong we were, how wrong they were, right? So that's what research is. It's the process of looking. Now in academia, then this is, and I know I don't want to offend you, but I know that I put this next slide in here because I wanted, here we go. Now this is something that a lot of people don't know. And it's important to do this because we're talking about arts-based research. And universities, as I just said, have to have research. If there's no research in a university, then it's what I would call, and it's a bit of a derogatory term, but I would call a paint-by-number university. Do you know what paint-by-numbers are? Any of you have kids where you've gone out and bought these packages of where the shapes are on the paper, and every shape on the paper has numbers, and it comes with a little package of paint, and every paint has a number? And then what you have to do, you have to match the paint number to the thing on the thing. And so you end up painting a picture exactly. I know I've seen them in Malaysia, you know. We call them paint by numbers. Basically, in a paint by number, and they're not very good because your child will not do anything creative. You simply do. When my son was, I have two boys. One of my oldest son is a pilot, and he was always been very much in terms of doing things the proper way. And for Christmas one year, they got Lego sets to make spaceships or something like that. He spread his out on the floor with the instructions, and he was following the instructions and putting it together. My other son is more artistic. And I went over, and he had dumped his out on the floor, and he was just putting it together randomly. And I said, why aren't you following the instructions? And he said, no, that's what they want me to do. And in fact, that's what paint by numbers are. They just want you to do that. But a university that if I would call a paint by numbers university, it means it does nothing creative. It just simply follows along a routine, and nobody wants that. So in a university, there are many different kinds of disciplines. Now, the humanities. Now, you don't have the humanities at Aswara. I think it's a mistake, but that's another story, right? Because it's very hard to be artists without having an understanding of the humanities, right? But anyway, things like history, linguistics, the arts, literature, performing, visual, philosophy, religion, and literature. These are the humanities. And UM, for example, teaches the humanities. Now, here's another one. The sciences, the social sciences, there's not what they call hard science. Hard science is something else. The social science are things like anthropology, cultural studies, economics, political science, psychology, sociology. They're the ones who study our society, and they're pretty scientific. They calculate things according to numbers and so on. Now, what have I got here? This one here, see? And here we go. The other one is the natural sciences. Biology, chemistry, physics, earth sciences, space sciences, mathematics, computer science, and so on and so on and so on, right? That's what a university is made up of. And somewhere in among that are the arts. Now the sciences, the natural sciences, they measure stuff. That's what they do. They count things, they look at things, they count, they come up with numbers, and these numbers provide them with conclusions. But we don't do that. That's not what we do. And then the other one is, of course, applied science. Medicine is not science, right? Engineering is not science. These are applied sciences. They take what the sciences have found out and they apply it, which is what governments are usually interested in, right? Governments are not interested in science. They want applied science because that is going to bring in patents and is going to bring money into the country or into the university. All right, now, what's this one here? Okay. And there's generally two ways of looking at it. There's scientific, which is the quantitative, that just means numbers. And the humanities uses the qualitative. Now, qualitative is more difficult because it involves interviews, it involves observations and those kinds of things. But it's not measurable. You observe, you draw conclusions, but it's not, you can't measure it. That's why, for example, the word hypothesis, you know that term? Have you all heard that term, the hypothesis, or I think sometimes you might call it hypothesis, right? The hypothesis, or the, I would refer it as the hypothesis, but I know the other one. So, in our space research, we don't use an hypothesis. That belongs to the scientific method. Because one thing about an hypothesis is that you look at what's been written and you say, given that these things exist and that this exists, therefore this must exist. Then you set off to do your research. And you guess what happens sometimes? The thing that you think exists does not exist. Because it is an assumption. And we don't go by assumptions. The other reason why we don't use them is that an hypothesis is something that if I do an experiment in science, and my hypothesis is that given A, B, and C, that D must exist. Okay? I should be then able to give that to somebody else, and what should they be able to do with it? They should be able to repeat it and come up with the same conclusion. You can't do that in qualitative research. You can't do that in arts-based research. If you're using interviews or whatever it might be, you can't go out and interview the same people over again, so that doesn't work. Okay, so now I want to find a way to get back to, so I hope that that's not something, I'm sure you all knew all this stuff beforehand, but generally the, I want to go up here somewhere right now. Okay. I've done that. Now, before I go on, but what is art? We're all involved in it one way or the other, whether it's in film or in music. What's your art base?
Music.
Music, okay. Whether it's art, music, film, or what's yours?
Music.
Music. And management?
Yeah.
And yours is?
Film.
Film, okay. The question is the same thing. Why do we do it? And this is probably one of the best reasons I know. This is an American guy who long since passed away. He said, the purpose of art is to lay bare the questions which have been hidden by the answers. Now, I know that's confusing, right? Okay? Anybody think they understand what it means? There's no wrong answers. I guess, but what does it say that questions that have been hidden by the answers? What do you think that means? Don't be afraid. There's no wrong answers or anything. And I know as soon as I say, you will say, oh yeah, I was going to say that. I was going to say that.
In the art,
Yeah, I mean, it's like this. Sometimes we don't ask questions because we think there are answers. Somebody has given us an answer to something. As a university professor for 30-odd years in a humanities, teaching in a part of the world where there's a lot of the fundamentalist Christians or whatever, and they would come to school, they would come to university. In the first year, they'd be there, you know, and so on. And the second year, they would understand that somebody had been covering up everything by giving them the answers. And as soon as they realized that if you remove the answers, inside there are a lot of questions, right? So, do you know the term status quo? Status quo, right? We sometimes are told to be satisfied with the status quo, the way things are. Well, artists are never satisfied with the status quo. That's why they're artists, that's why they're rebels. That's why they get into trouble, right? They always want to go beyond, a little bit beyond, right? And then, so the idea is that there are answers out there that have been given to us by society that we live in. But if we scratch away at the answer, inside, you're going to see a lot of questions. And those questions is what art seems to do. Art makes us look at things differently. Art makes us like the picture of the cat. Sometimes you just need a new perspective on things. We can look straight ahead, and that's okay. These are the answers that we've been given. But once in a while, whether you're music or dance or film, once in a while, you should just try something a little different. Look at it from another perspective. And that's how people become well known in music, right? You don't become famous in music by playing the status quo, right? You want to play elevator music, then fine, play elevator music, right? But you're never going to become famous playing elevator music. If you want to be known in music or in theater, you just got to start to jump off the deep end. Do you know the term avant-garde? A-V-A-N-T-G-A-R-D-E? They use it sometimes to refer to art. They were talking about avant-garde art. Okay. Oh, I thought I had a pencil here. I know I did a pencil one time because Fariz gave me a pencil, but I can't write it down. The word avant-garde, when it refers to art, does it refer to modern art or old art? Which one? Do you think? No. Avant-garde. Now I get my pen. Here. I'll show you the word. I don't know how this works anymore. Oh, right over here on this side. I'll just write it over here. I'll just write it over here. Avant-garde means out in front. Out in front. Out in front. Art that's out in front. In front of the group, in front of the pack, in front of our. Oh, hi. Okay. Art that's out in front. We refer to that usually as and the other one is the cutting edge. You know that expression, the cutting edge?
Is it like thinking outside the box?
Now, yeah, thinking outside the box is if you want to be avant-garde, if you want to deal with those questions, if you want to be the kind of art that deals with the questions that have been covered up by the answers, you have to think outside the box. Because if you stay inside the box, all you're going to see are the same four walls, right? So, but the cutting edge is another term they use in art. Any idea? What is a cutting edge?
You are different from others.
Yeah, I know, but just forget about art. What is the word cutting edge? What do you think that means? What? What?
Nothing we cut the edge.
Yeah, for example, if you were measuring off something like cloth or linoleum or something like that, is this edge along here? That's the cutting edge, right?
Beyond the limit. Go beyond the limit.
Yes. When you go beyond, when you're at the cutting edge, you are going beyond. Because once you're right here, all the rest of the art world is right behind you. And you're right here. That's the cutting edge. And then you fly off and you're off into another world. But if we go back to that thing that I just mentioned just now about James Baldwin, that art is about understanding the questions that have been covered up by the answers. There are so many answers that our society has been given that the real questions are never dealt with. Until somebody, an academic or whatever it might be, writes a paper or does an artwork or does a dance or theater or music, and somebody says, you know what, I never thought of that before. Because that's what art does. It makes us see things different from the way we normally do. Okay, given all of that, I know that I'm going to talk about arts-based research here, and so this is where I'm trying to find. Okay. I gave a paper here years before I came here to teach, and that's what about arts-based research, and I called it Enhancing Uncertainty. Because in some ways, that's what art does. Art does not let us sit down and be comfortable. It makes us ask questions. That's why Why do you think, for example, governments that are a bit iffy like to shut down artists? You think about it, it's really strange. There's some governments, when they come into power, one of the first things they will do is to shut down artists.
But they have a lot of questions.
They have too many questions, right? They just shut them up, right? And you know, that's exactly why. And of the arts, the one that gets shut down first is theater. And why? Because theater, you bring a group of people into a theater and you have an actor. Actors are usually fairly, I don't know, very popular sometimes. And the actor can talk directly to a group of people. And that's why, one of the reasons why they shut them down. And this is the very same reason why they would take plays and read them and say, you know, I remember a friend of mine who was a director here in KL years ago when they were very strict about this, and they were directing a play, and they gave a copy to the censor people, and the censor people would come and listen to the rehearsals, and they gave back the copy of the script, and they had blacked out everything that they thought the audiences shouldn't hear. Well, what do you think actors are going to do? No, they're not going to break the law, but you know what they did? They had a rehearsal, and every time they came to a blacked out part, the actors froze, and they timed how long it would take for them to say it, and then they unfroze. So when the show opened, the show would start off, and all of a sudden the actors would just, and then go on again. And they did that throughout the whole show. I mean, that's what artists do, right? And suddenly somebody says, oh, we should have shut them down, right? Because, you know that they're going to be. Okay. All right. Now, art is not something. Now, let me put it this way. In the last,
It's okay. It's okay.
I
It's
am
okay,
not a
Prof.
photogenic person. I take terrible photographs, right? I mean, you know, in our family album, there are no pictures of me. There are pictures of everybody else, but there's never any of me. Now, I want to explain this to you because this is important. Something has happened in our society, and I will get to what we're dealing with here, and that is the world, the press, they see the arts as decoration. Do you understand what I mean by that? Anybody else, you not understand what I mean by that? Do you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. The arts are seen as decoration,
Decoration.
purely as entertainment.
Yeah.
And that's not the way the arts are. The arts are very, very powerful. It's a very powerful medium to explore issues, to look for things, and whatever it might be. But somehow, in the last 50 years or more, or so, the press starts to see the arts as just decoration, right? Paintings are only important if they will fit on somebody's wall.
Tourist arts.
Yeah, tourist art. There you go again. That's another way of doing it. You know, it's like people will. I mean, it's like the people who are looking at an art gallery, and the man is about to buy a painting, and his wife says to him, "But where are you going to put it? It doesn't match the furniture." Right? I mean, that can be said without too much forethought, too much imagination. Okay, but the arts are not decoration. We know that if you're involved in it. Music can be very, very powerful. Certainly theater can, or dance, or film, especially film. It can be extremely powerful medium. But we forget that sometimes, and people go and they think it's entirely entertainment. And then when they go and they see a play and it's not just entertainment, what happens? What do they do? Hmm? Well, they may say boring. Yes, they do say that a lot, especially if there's talking. And if Malaysian audiences aren't laughing every couple of minutes, right, they're going to say boring, you know, that sort of stuff. I know that. I've been there. I've done that. But actually, if there's a powerful message to the play, often they don't like it. Right? They want the status quo. They want to be left alone. Well, that's not what the art does. Now, here, you don't have to do this. This lady here, she wrote a book about, Lord, 10, I didn't write the number down there, 10 years ago, more than that. Right after 9/11, when the whole world grew up, especially in the Middle East, in Muslim countries and so on, there was the terrorism and all that kind of threats were going on. Now, she was born in Libya, but she's an American, and she's a lawyer and teaches at the University of South Carolina. And what she did was, she went to all of the hot spots in the world where we were hearing things about the Taliban, we were talking about all these groups of people that were sort of imposing on people's freedom and so on and so on, right? So she went to all of the, I don't know about all of them, she went to most of them. And she interviewed people about how they were dealing with the suppression that they were having to deal with. And you know what most of them were doing? The arts. There were groups in Pakistan of girls involved in theater. It's a fantastic book. Anyway, I copied this out because I like what she had to say here. And it applies now. Because she saw people using the arts as a way of surviving, a way of teaching, a way of dealing with the issues that they were surrounded with. In an era, at a time when so many successful performers in the West are busy selling perfume, modeling designer clothes, or dancing with the stars, there is an entirely different vision of what it can mean to be an artist. But it is not a vision that is easy to realize. We forgot that. We think of the arts as in okay, I combined two things here. Okay, now, scientific research is you have an assumption, and you say, given this and this and this, if I go down this path, I will find at the end this thing I'm looking for. Well, chances are very good that you may not find it. But in the process, you might have found it out here somewhere. And that's what arts-based research does. It allows you to explore other possibilities, other avenues, instead of going the straight and narrow, right? The straight and narrow is when we use the word straight and narrow to refer to the status quo. Stay on the straight and narrow. In other words, stay on the road. Don't go off the road, because if you do, someone will catch you. All right. Arts-based research can be defined as the use of the artistic process, the actual making of artistic expression in all of the different forms of the arts, as a way of understanding and examining experience by both researchers and the people that are involved in the study. Now, there are two kinds. You can be involved in arts-based research. For example, your music students, if you want to create a piece of music, then that's okay. You are going to explore different avenues, different sounds, different whatever, my instruments and things of that nature, and you are going to look at it from a different perspective and to create something different. That's one way. The other way is to use the artistic process. Because the artistic process is, we get in a studio somewhere and we rehearse and we go through things and so on and so on and so on until we come up with it. And here's one way in which I will explain it to you, and that is, well, first of all, So one is we use arts-based research to explore the artistic form. Or we use the artistic process to explore something else. Aswara is a student of mine from here. He just finished eventually, but his thesis was on theater. And what he did was he interviewed people who were younger than 20 and people who were older than 60, 65. And he talked to them about Malaysia, about their concept of living in Malaysia and so on. And out of that, he created a play in which he explores the whole question of identity. So in some ways, he uses theater as a way to look at the question of identity. And it was amazing when he would present in, I don't know, a place like this, there were lecturers who would say, but you don't have enough people. And he said, well, I do. I have about 10 people from the below 20, and I have another 15 people from over 60, 65. But finally, at one point, I was there, and I said, I just want to remind you, this is not sociology, right? If sociology, you would do probably 1,000 people to draw some conclusions. But that's not what we're after. We're after something in which we can create some stories, that we can create something that you would call a work of art. Now, I don't know where we are in terms of time. I have no idea. I haven't watched, but here's an example that I gave the last time I taught this course. Let's assume that a researcher wants to find out how, do you know the term autistic? You know autistic children? You know that expression, autistic? Anybody not know what that means? No? Autistic?
Yeah.
You all know that. It's very, very big in Malaysia in the last 10 years. There's people doing it, right? Let's say some researcher wanted to see how autistic children saw, how they looked at things. I'm making this up, right? So it's not a scientific thing. So let's say she had 20 cameras and she had 20 students who were autistic. And she, or he, would take them out to the park and give them a camera and just let them take pictures. Right? And over the course of the time she's working on it, she would have all these pictures, and she would have the pictures up according to the student and so on. And from looking at the pictures, she could determine what these children were interested in. Maybe there's some similarities, maybe there's no similarities, or whatever it might be. That would be using the process. She's using the artistic process to look at a particular issue. There would be no exhibition. There would be no exhibition of the children's artwork, because that's not why she was involved in it, right? She wanted to look at how these children could see that small part of the world where she would take them to the park or whatever it might be. And from those photographs, she might be able to draw some conclusions. That's not art, but she was using the artistic process in order to be able to do that. Today, psychologists use the artistic process quite a lot. Other people in the social sciences are now using the artistic process. Counselors, especially counselors, and especially in education. Somebody is a teacher. The teachers are using the artistic process, arts-based research, quite a lot in order to be able to pursue certain issues about learning. But in the case that I described, there would be no exhibit. she wouldn't have a room like this where she would put up the artwork and people would come to see it, because that's not what she was doing. Right? Now somebody else may take a different stance on it and give cameras out to people, another group of people, and see what they, give them out to people who live on the street, for example, and see how they see the world, or whatever it might be. But you're using the artistic process in order to do that. Now, that's number two. Number one was you're using arts-based research to explore the artwork that you are working in, whether it's in music or dance and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on, right? And that's legitimate and everything else. So that's basically the difference. Now, coming up with proposal, something else, I guess. But has anybody decided on what their proposal is, what they're working on, or you all have to do that to get into the program, right?
Yeah, they still have lectures on how to. They have still have lectures on how to
do the program.
The issues, the problems.
Yeah, because you start off with a question. Start with a question. Don't start trying to get fancy about, I gotta have long. Have a question. Why? Ask yourself why something is the way it is, or why, or what, or how, or all those kinds of things. And once you get your question, then find the best way to find the answer. That's all it is. So don't be overwhelmed by it. People think, oh my God, I'm in a master's program, I'm in a PhD program, I'm going to have to do all these kinds of things. You don't. The one thing you need to do, though, and you cannot get away from it, is you need to read. Regardless of whether you're using arts-based research or not, you need to read. You need to know what other people have done. And if you can't do that, if you're not going to do that, then it's not going to work. Because you have to do this literature review, which involves looking at the art, but you must be able to do that. And to do that, you have to read. And you get the library. The library at Aswara is not very rich. There's a little bit there, but it's not
up to date.
What?
Not up to date.
No, and your best bet would be to use the National Library. Sometimes people use the National Library, and I suspect that there must be some arrangements made for you to go to other universities as well in order to be able to do it. But be very careful with online sources. If it's not a vetted source, don't use it. You can start off by going to Wikipedia, but don't ever quote from Wikipedia. Why not? Why not? That's a good question, isn't it? Why can't you use Wikipedia in your dissertation? No, it is vetted actually. It's what you were saying?
Anybody can edit it.
No, you can't. Not anybody can. You have to now submit your edition, your changes to the Wikipedia board, and they will then meet to see if it's what you do. Originally they could, but not anymore. I'm sorry. What is? Why can't you use Wikipedia?
The sources.
You're right. It's about the sources. Wikipedia is already a third source. When you're doing work, research work, you should only use first source, original material. But Wikipedia is taking stuff that comes out of a textbook, and then they're writing it again in Wikipedia. So therefore, it's 3 times removed from the original. That's why you can't use it. However, the best reason for using Wikipedia is to look at the end of the entry.
Yes.
And what do you find?
Source.
All their sources, right? And And then what you do, you copy out their sources and you go and try to find the sources that the Wikipedia reader did. But that's why you use Wikipedia. But if you have to use an encyclopedia, I think Wikipedia is better than any of the others, because it is what's called open source. You know what that means? Open source? That means people can go in and arrange for it to be fixed. And that's, but Encyclopedia Britannia and those places, they don't have that, right? There's a mistake, it's there. And so, anyway, what time is it?
6.
So
Okay, I say, oh, 6, so I've looked at some time yet. So, all right, the time then is, it's a bit of a rush. If I were here longer, I would certainly wouldn't mind sitting down talking to you about shaping your
Issues.
Questions
Yeah.
into a proposal. I've been had some success at doing that. People say, well, what do you want to, I say, what do you want to do? And then people say, well, I'm looking at this, and then, how can we look at this? What is it you want to find out? And then once we do that. So, anyway, anybody having any questions about so far? I have a few other things I might add on to here, but if you have some questions so far, I would certainly answer them. You have a topic yet?
I do. Can I share it with you and then we see?
You certainly can.
So the problem that I have for my proposal is application of Usman's Awang work. Usman Awang is one of the iconic characters in Malaysia. He's a poet. So the problem is his application is only being used in high school for examination purposes, and when people graduate from high school, they no longer use or find his works applicable to daily life. So my proposal is to take his work and make it into music composition so that it can be applied in various methods, like for example choral singing and all that, which high school students can use it for competitions or for performances, and if we have any national events and all that, there are uses for music. So the question that I wrote here is that can making Usman Awang's work be used by more people, and can it be more applicable if his works, which is the poetry, be turned into music composition? The way I look at it here is that it kind of still seems like at the end of the project, there will need to be feedback from people whether this is applicable to them. So it doesn't really quite feel qualitative for me. You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not quantitative. I don't think it's quantitative. There's a little bit of something in there, but if you're going to say, how can we make his work more relevant or more significant to an older population or something like that, I mean, then you have to figure out. You say you're going to do it by setting it to music.
Yeah.
All right. Will you then do a concert?
Yeah.
Hmm?
Yeah.
You would, so
To
at the end
premiere
of
the
it,
compositions,
you would do a
yeah.
concert.
Yeah.
The concert will be a major part of your research.
Yeah.
So you would take his poetry, and then you would combine. You would compose music to fit the poetry.
Yeah.
And then you would get some musicians together, choral people or whatever
Correct.
it might be, and then you would do a concert.
Correct. And the scores will be available for everyone after that. The
Sure.
scores.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the second. That's
Yeah.
the second one. But all right. So you do a concert, or 2 concerts, or 3 concerts, or whatever it might be. Then how are you going to tell if, in fact, what you've just done has any meaning to the people who are watching it? Well, you do some kind of survey, some kind of audience
That's part
survey?
of the thought process, but
Yeah.
but then now that would feel quantitative, right? Or am I getting it wrong?
Well, I mean, if you do, the problem with the survey is not. I mean, you don't want to do something. Count up the numbers and say of the people who came, 120 said they liked it, and then only 15 people said they didn't like it, and so on. I mean, you're going to try to get into and get involved into as to why, and rather than a survey, I mean, it's what they call in In theater, we call it post-mortem, which is after the death of, right? That's what the word post-mortem means. But when the other thing is after the concert, you would have a session where people would start talking about what they saw.
Reflection.
And reflection of it and so on. And then that, in a sense, could be chaired by you, generally maybe not, maybe chaired by somebody else. And then these responses that people are getting. I mean, you have to be good with questions in order to get people to respond to try to get to what their feelings about what they just saw and so on. So I think the surveys don't tell you anything.
Okay.
Right? I mean, they're just some numbers and it looks great if you want to put a graph in there, but I am not of that way of thinking. Putting a graph in belongs to the scientists. Let them have that. You know, the social scientists can do the graphs. We don't do those things, right? And but I would like very much if you were doing that. I think doing say 3 performances, maybe at 2 different places or 2 different groups or whatever it might be, and then there would be a discussion afterwards in which people would be invited to stay behind. If you have the money, then you can provide some refreshments, but tell them you can't get the refreshments until after. Well, you must know this about audiences. If you provide refreshments, the people will come out and eat it all and then gone, right? You know, trying to hold it back a little bit, you know, so that once all the things are over, then you can bring it out. But
so lastly, you can conclude your conclusion, right?
Yeah.
The thesis, right? The report.
Right.
Conclude from your discussion.
From the
From
discussion.
your reflection.
So the purpose of the discussion is more like to draw out from the audience.
Right.
What do they? It's like a mass interview.
Right. Find out for them about how they felt like it, how they responded to it. I mean, did they like it? And if you didn't like it, that's okay too.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
I mean, when someone says I didn't like it, well, that's okay. But you have to tell me why.
You feel something, right?
Yeah. When I was in graduate school doing my master's, which was a long time ago, some of you weren't even born, I was part of a course that was entitled, "What do I say after I say I like it?" Right? It's a very interesting question. That we say, "Oh yeah, I really like your show." And you say, why did you like it? Oh, I don't know, kind of like colors, you know, or something like that. Generally, most people think you want to hear that you actually liked it, but I think you need to have some good questions to be able to ask people about specifically, and then you have a bigger statement about, will this catch on? Will this, if you make this available, will people use it outside of high school? I mean, that you can only speculate, but you can certainly give copies of it to people or make copies available to people if they want to. Music teachers can write in and get it for free or all those kinds of things and so on. And then, if this is your master's, is it a master's, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If a master's, I mean, you may say, maybe 2 years on the road, you might do a paper on your thesis, in which you will draw on whether, in fact, there has been any performances of the pieces that you did. Now, there are two factors involved, and you have to be honest about them. One is the poetry itself. The poetry, is it relevant to today's audiences? Does it speak to today's audiences? I mean, you know, I was downstairs with my friend Faris, and we were reading an article that says, today, the internet is 30 years old. Isn't that shocking? Same thing only yesterday, but it's 30 years old. Right? So you need to ask people. I mean, people. That means anybody 35 years old or more have no memory of a world without internet. And it shaped how we see things, how we see the world and all those kinds of things. So I think the first question is the poetry still relevant? I mean, and you get some of that from people, from the audiences and so on. And the other one,
The selection of your poetry. The
yeah.
selection.
But the other one is more personal. Maybe your music isn't very good. I'm sorry to put it that way, but you know what I mean? There are two reasons. You can like the lyrics and not the music. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's that expression from the 80s when I hadn't heard it in a long time, when somebody was trying to explain something and somebody would say, forget the music, just send me the lyrics, you know? I don't want to hear the whole song, I just want the lyrics. And I think we all know what that means, right? You know, just get to the lyrics. So anyway, there's the two things. And I think there's no apologies for that. I mean, some people like music and some people don't like music, and some people like the kind of music you do and other people don't like the kind of music you do. I mean, that's what makes the world an interesting place. If we all like the same thing, then we would all be programmed into the kind of music that we would watch, and thank whatever gods there are that we're not, right? I mean, as much as you may not like the punk music scene, probably good to have it around, you know? I mean, it expands our concept of what music is. And with poetry, what is the author's name again?
Usman Awang.
Yes, I know. Is he the guy who wrote? Well, I know it in English, Scattered Bones.
Yeah.
Tulang-tulang berserakan.
Scattered Bones.
Yes.
One of my favorite novels.
Tulang-tulang
I love
berserakan.
that novel. Yeah, I really love that novel. Dr. Saleha, who used to work here, she knew him.
Yeah.
And she said he was a very kind man, a very, very gentle man that she talked to and so on. But no, first when I arrived here, one of my students at UITM gave me a copy of Scattered Bones. And I read it right away. I loved it. And in fact, I've kept it around and I've read it many times and always discussed it when I would ask my students in classes if they had ever heard of him, and they'd never heard of him. You know, I mean, but you know, that's just the way it goes. But no, I love that. I love that book, and I've not read the poetry, but certainly I've read it only in English.
Okay.
But I think it's a book that Malaysian young people should really read. It is a chapter, you know. There's a scene there where one of his buddies, there's a group of them, 5 of them or something, and it's all autobiographical. And there's 5 of them, and in the morning, one of the guys says to them that he was getting married that day, right? It was the first they had heard of it. And they go into town, and at some point during the day, they go to the house of his girlfriend's house, and the wedding is performed, they have some food, and then they come home. I mean, it was just a simple procedure, you know, without any fanfare and all that kind of stuff. But I liked the movie. I love the show, and I'm surprised. It's too late now. I don't think anybody would make a movie of it anymore. That kind of stuff does not sell anymore. I mean, but certainly there was a time when I thought that would